Okay, welcome to week 4 of I Forgive You. Now what? Hopefully you passed out the verses for everyone to read when they come up as we go along. We're going to talk about this time how to forgive. We've gotten to some of the good stuff here, how to actually make this happen. By this time, you should have had a lot of opportunity for discussion to really change our mindsets and get away from the world's view, society's view, the cultural view of what forgiveness is and is not. So at this point, you should have a really good foundation in what forgiveness actually is, what it is not, and why we have to do it. So now we're going to start talking about how to do it. Now, if you're in a group, you can pause after each one of these bullet points. These are going to be the steps, if you will. Pause after each one, read the verse that applies to it, whoever picked up that verse, and talk about it. Talk about where you may struggle with this, or maybe this was a new concept for you and you hadn't really thought of it that way before. So that is how I would go about this. If you're doing this by yourself, do the same thing. Stop, reread that verse, think about it, and figure out how you might be able to carry this out. So we'll start with right off the bat, admit the pain. Don't skip this step. Don't just, assume God knows what you're talking about, which he does, but say it out loud. Confess. It's very much like confession. Say it out loud. What was the offense? What's the pain? Start with that. The second step, take up your sword. So the verse that would apply here is Ephesians 6:17. Take up the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. You can't do this alone. You can't forgive alone. You need the gift of God's grace. You need the Holy Spirit's help. The word is a weapon in our arsenal. It's not a defense item. It's a weapon in our arsenal. So take up your sword, pray for strength, pray for compassion, pray for patience, and pray for healing. Number 3, love, bless, pray. Ask for blessings for your offender because just forgiving isn't enough. Now you may stop here and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, all right, I think I can forgive. I'm pretty sure I can forgive. But you want me to pray for blessings for the person who hurt me. You want me to pray for the cousin that stole money from me. Blessings for that person. You want me to pray for the coworker who lied and cost me my job. You want me to pray for my spouse, who had multiple affairs. No. I can forgive them, but I'm not going to pray to bless them. You have to. God commands it. This is a good time for someone to read Matthew 5:44 because we have to pray for those who persecute you. God tells us you can't just forgive, you have to pray for these people. And this part is going to be extremely difficult. It is so hard to forgive a person to begin with, and it's even harder to pray for their well-being, their health, their blessings, whatever, it could be. Step 4, fight the bitterness. Do not give in to the desire for revenge. Do not return evil for evil. God makes it very clear that we are not to commit revenge on people who have done us wrong. This is a good opportunity to read 1 Peter and the Romans verse that apply to this. Step 5, what was your part? This step is often skipped. Ask God if you had any part in the matter. A lot of times when there's a conflict, don't get me wrong, somebody might be 90% wrong. They might be completely wrong and you might have 10%. What did you encourage it? Did you give them opportunity? Did you say or do something to stoke the fire? I'm not saying that you should take it all upon yourself and feel like you deserved what they did to you because maybe you had a small part in the situation. That is not the case at all. But ask God if you had any part in the matter and then address it and ask forgiveness for yourself. This is not about finding sin. Although you may find sin in the root of this, you may not have sinned at all, but you are identifying the root cause and addressing it. So maybe it doesn't happen again. And now let's talk about the prodigal son. Go ahead and pause here though if everybody needs more time to talk about these steps, how to effectively carry them out, where it might be hard for you. Let the group encourage you where you might be struggling. Perhaps trying to figure out if you had any part in the situation is where you're having trouble, or maybe you're having trouble where a lot of people have trouble, and that's praying blessings for your offender. But let's talk about the prodigal son now, Luke 15. So go ahead and after I'm done speaking on this, go ahead and pause and everybody can share their notes on the prodigal son. What did you come up with last week while you were reading it? What did you think of the son? What did you think of the father? What did you think of the brother? A lot of times we skip talking about the brother and his reaction and his potential feelings. Where did you see forgiveness being demonstrated in the way that we've explained forgiveness is? Where did you see any examples of what forgiveness is not and how we've outlined what it is not? Talk about what you saw in each of these characters and how they went about their forgiveness or unforgiveness. God is always happy when we turn back to Him. We should be overjoyed when that happens with someone who hurt us. What did unforgiveness give the brother but misery? He wasn't happy or peaceful. So go ahead and stop here and talk about the prodigal son. Now we're going to talk about reconceptualizing the memory. So this is exercise 4. Find a new way to think about the person who hurt you. Think about the context. Reconceptualizing the memory can make it easier for you to forgive. It can soften your heart and make you more open to forgiving. So find a new way to think about the person who hurt you. Think about the context. What was happening in that person's life when this occurred? Why did they perhaps do what they did? What is their story? What was your story? And I say that because were they hurting? Were they going through something hard? And then what was your story? Were you going through something? Did you lash out in response and make the situation worse? Where are you in your life? So the article that I recommended last week, Dr. Leaf's article, she points out, let's walk through an example of this. So share whatever you feel comfortable with. Ask yourself the questions from Dr. Leaf, and then what is the result? Are you condoning or excusing the behavior? Not at all. Are you trusting this person again? Not necessarily. And you don't have to. I have an example, and then I want you to stop and as a group talk about maybe some of your own examples. Stop and reflect on an offender and think about, you know what, maybe there's some things that I haven't considered here before. I have an example where my son started kindergarten at a school, and we ended up pulling him from the school. He spent the kindergarten year, and then in first grade we sent him to a different school because we were very unhappy with this first school. The teacher, his kindergarten teacher, and his principal were both, I was so angry with them because we didn't know yet what my son had. We didn't have a diagnosis. We just knew there was something about him that was different. He was highly emotional, really struggled to pay attention. He was, just super highly emotional. He would cry, he would yell, he would hide under a desk. We didn't know what was going on. At that time, though, the teacher and the principal were of zero help, and neither one of them expressed any interest in being of any help. In fact, the teacher was extremely indifferent, like this is somebody else's problem. And the principal was was harsh actually, almost like a drill sergeant, where she would be like, you need to figure out how to get him in line. The school had never at any point helped walk me through figuring out the resources and what was available for a child who obviously had some special needs, but we just didn't know what they were yet because he was so young. So after this experience, I was extremely angry. I did reconceptualize the memory after I read Dr. Leaf's article because I was really struggling to forgive. This was my child and I was angry. But after reconceptualizing the memory, there were some things that the teacher was going through. She had recently gone through a divorce, had 2 young children. There was things that the principal was going through, some things in her personal life. And even though that doesn't excuse their behavior, and even though what they did was still very wrong, it softened my heart to a point where I was able to figure out how to forgive them and also how to pray for their well-being. And ultimately, things worked out good for us. Hopefully, things were working out better for both of them. But this exercise, I can't stress enough how much it can really help you soften your heart if you're struggling to forgive, if you're struggling to pray for that person. This can help you get to that point where you're able to do it. So, assignment 5 over the next week, pray for multiple people this time. You could pray for a different person every day, or maybe a couple at a time. Pick 3 people and pray for all 3 of them each day. However you want to do it, but pray for multiple people and practice these steps that we've discussed today. Admit the pain, take up your sword, love, bless, pray. Reconceptualize the memory if you have to and if it helps, and address your part. Ask forgiveness if you had anything to do with this, even if it's just a very, very small thing. And just remember that that does not absolve the other person from their responsibility. It doesn't mean that what they did to you was okay. It just means you're working on you, and that's healthy. Then read and reflect on these following verses, and I will see everybody again next week.